the Scandinavian Expo, where we've had very interesting and important discussions all day. And thank you for being so patient and waiting so late for meeting us. Also, as you've already understood, we had the great honor of having Energy Minister Arman Halushenko from Ukraine visiting us. And this really was an important and also emotional meeting, hearing him speak during our lunch. And he's also had a bilateral with many of the ministers visiting today. It's been little over a year since the unlawful and awful Russian invasion of Ukraine, and it really put the rest of the discussions for the day in a different lighting, really stressing the emphasis and really emphasizing the need for cutting our dependence from fossil fuels, and another important opportunity to mark the European Union's joint standing by Ukraine. Since last year, Russia's weaponization of gas supplies has led to unsustainably high energy prices across Europe. Gas prices have reached record levels and electricity prices have followed. The EU has responded with decisive measures both for gas and electricity to reduce our dependency on Russian fuel imports and to support both European households and businesses. But we cannot be complacent. We need to speed up the phasing out of dependence on Russian fossil fuels and decarbonize our energy system. Therefore, today, energy ministers had a fruitful discussion on how the current electricity market design can be improved and how Europe can prepare gas supplies in good time for next winter. And regarding the winter preparedness, it is clear that Europe has made enormous progress on managing gas supplies since the start of the war. But one conclusion is clear. It is not over yet. And next winter will bring new challenges. The supply needs to be secured as soon as possible to avoid extreme gas and electricity prices and, worse, a gas shortage. We also had an important exchange of views regarding the challenges in today's electricity market design and what reforms should be prioritized. This is especially relevant for the Commission's upcoming legislative proposal mid-March. I would say that the overarching message was clear. The market design should be able to protect consumers and at the same time account for security of supply and for ensuring investments in the electricity system of the future and accelerating the clean energy transition. So we need to find some way to find a balance between the price consumers pay, the incentives for investments, and a sufficient level of security of supply. The electricity market revisions will be a highly prioritized matter for the Swedish presidency, and I look forward to close cooperations with all member states. In the afternoon, we had a joint session between the transport and energy ministers on how future EU legislation can reduce the dependence of fossil fuels through massive electrification of both industry and transport. Many ministers highlighted the need to get more and cheap fossil-free electricity in place for industrial competitiveness. Regarding e-mobility, sustainable biofuels and electrofuels, we seem to agree that we need all solutions and let market mechanisms develop the most cost-efficient alternatives. Another point was the need to secure public acceptance for the energy transition, and this will indeed require affordable energy. Other topics included the need for new infrastructure for distribution of electricity and electrofuels, but also the importance of innovation and skilled workforce. There is also a need for both public and private investments. And I'm glad to have so many of our colleagues made it to Stockholm today, and I look forward to tomorrow where we will continue our discussions. Please, dear Kadri, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ebba. Good evening, and I want to start by thanking Ebba and Andres, you for splendid organization, and this was a great idea to organize also a joint session between energy ministers and transport ministers. So I'm delighted to be here, and we discussed several important topics. I want to mention three in particular. First, coming almost at the end of the winter, and 1 year after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, this meeting has been a timely opportunity to review how far we have come in ensuring Europe's energy security. I have debriefed ministers about the progress made to overcome the gas crisis and to phase out dependency from Russian fossil fuels. In this short space of time, the change we have witnessed in Europe's energy system has been remarkable. The numbers speak for themselves. Russia is no longer the first gas supplier for Europe, replaced by the United States and Norway. In 12 months, Russian pipeline gas supplies dropped from 155 billion cubic meters to 62 BCM. Our LNG imports, in contrast, have increased from 80 BCM in 2021 to 135 BCM in 2022. At the same time, member states have cut gas demand by 19% between August and January, and in other terms, Europe has managed also to reduce gas consumption by 38 billion cubic meters. Our gas storage remains high, with over 62% filling. And all that happened while the clean energy transition accelerated. In 2022, Europe has installed almost 50 gigawatts of new renewables capacity, mostly in solar and wind. And today we can say that Russia's energy blackmail has failed. We expect to end the heating season with over 50% of our storage filled. Gas market prices remain high, but they are around 50 euros per megawatt hour. This is much lower than the peak levels reached last year. And by many standards, Europe is now more energy secure, less dependent from Russia, and stronger than it was a year ago. But my message to the ministers has been clear. Our policies worked, our unity has been preserved, but the test is not over. We have just won the first battle, and there is still a long fight ahead of us. There is no room for complacency. We need to continue our work on diversification, renewables deployment, energy demand reduction and storage. Our voluntary 15% demand reduction target expires by the end of March, and we consider continuing demand reduction a no-regret option. It is key to ensure our preparedness for the next winter and for reaching the 90% storage target by 1st of November. We have also exchanged about the importance of protecting our critical infrastructure from any external threat. Following the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines, we need to take any threats seriously and increase our level of preparedness. The second point I want to mention concerns the reform of the electricity market design, which is Commission will present by mid-March. The current electricity market design has not been the cause of last year's high electricity prices, but for the way it works, it has not been able to protect consumers from the effects of gas market crisis. And it has become clear that we need to complement short-term markets with a more important role of long-term instruments to shelter consumers from price volatility and give credible price signals to renewable investors. And we need also to unlock opportunities for distributed resources coming from renewable communities and self-production, and to incentivize innovative forms of backup, like demand reduction and flexibility needed to balance variable renewables. The key direction of the reform will be to reduce the dependence of the electricity bills from the price of gas and to make our electricity framework fit for an energy system where in 2030, 70% of electricity will come from renewables. We want to also reinforce the rights of consumers so that they have access to better information and a greater variety of offers. We are working at full speed on the reform. Our public consultation ended 2 weeks ago with over 1,300 responses, which shows the level of expectations for this reform. And I have taken note of the points made by the ministers of where they see problems and solutions, and I will feed this in final preparation of the proposal. And finally, I want to mention the competitiveness of our industry in the clean transition. The global clean energy transition is opening incredible business opportunities for clean tech manufacturing. Europe leads the way in several sectors, but in others we are vulnerable or exposed to risks coming from long supply chains. Our industry is also under pressure because of the high energy prices and of the policies of offers and incentives in other parts of the world. We will discuss the EU response to these challenges tomorrow, and I will present the Commission analysis on the forthcoming Net Zero Industrial Act and the Critical Materials Act. And finally, I welcome the Ukrainian Minister German Galushenko being able to join us today. We appreciate very much his effort at the national level to maintain the functioning of energy system despite the war and the reckless Russian attacks against civil power infrastructure. Europe will continue to stand by Ukraine for as long as it takes, and we have discussed concrete ways for the EU to continue to show its solidarity in the coming month. And on all these points, I'm glad to see that this Council remains united and determined to face the challenges ahead. Thank you.
Please.
Thank you. And transport ministers had a very successful first day as well. We started with a discussion on future transport policy for a competitive and climate-neutral Europe. The EU member states have agreed on ambitious climate targets to reduce 55% of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and achieving climate neutrality by 2050. To achieve these targets, it is crucial to reduce emissions within the transport sector. Russia's horrible war of aggression against Ukraine emphasizes the importance of strengthening our community and making it resilient for the future. The EU has a crucial role to play in supporting Ukraine's efforts to rebuild its infrastructure after the war. And I agree with Kadri and Ebba here. It was a strong moment today when we had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Galushenko and to really underline the support from the whole Union that we are in this together and we will stand firmly together with Ukraine as long as it takes. And we are also ready to work with the reconstruction of Ukraine. This year, we celebrate 30 years of the single market. It has served us well, but the many difficult challenges that our union is facing underlines the need to step up our efforts and think long-term. This is not only a matter of urgency for climate action and energy security, it is also a matter of strengthening the competitiveness of the European transport industry and European industry in general on the global market. So discussions today have been very important. We must put in place a long-term policy framework on the EU level that encourages innovations and allows businesses to speed up their transition whilst ensuring competitiveness on a global market. This transition of the energy and transport sectors will have to be dealt with simultaneously in both policy sectors. And as was discussed today, we want to ensure a level playing field and predictability for the business. At the same time, policies must be flexible and allow member states to make full use of their potential and to ensure competitiveness within each mode of transport. It is not an easy task, but I was encouraged by today's discussion, and I look forward to tomorrow's exchange on how we best prepare for the Fit for 55 package. And I also look forward to the test driving sessions where policymakers from all Europe can have the opportunity to meet with transition makers, because the development is already ongoing. The technology is development in a very high speed, and tomorrow we will have the opportunity to test drive heavy vehicles produced totally electrified. So I'm looking forward to tomorrow's discussion as well. And Adina, your thoughts from today.
Thank you very much. Thank you both ministers for organizing this debate on transport and energy, two sectors which are more than interlinked nowadays. The face of one sector influences the face of the other. So this is a really important moment to talk together. Decarbonizing the transport sector depends on having alternative to fossil fuels. We need sufficient supplies of renewable electricity, sustainable biofuels, clean hydrogen, and other renewable and low-carbon fuels. And the key word in this sentence is sufficient. Demand for mobility is growing, which is a good thing, because that means more economic prosperity. The Commission has no preference for how fossil fuels are replaced. That is for the market to decide. But what we do insist on is having sufficient alternatives to reach our emission targets. The Commission can help coordinate the supply, distribution and demand issues. We set out how we plan to do this in the Fit for 55 package of proposals of 2021, which is now in the hands of the Swedish presidency, and I have my high hopes on you to get it through. The alternative fuel infrastructure regulation, for example, it promotes supply and distribution. Its provisions will result in a minimum 1 million electric charging points on our roads by 2030 and over 16 millions by 2050. Building the recharging infrastructure will get us closer to the goals, and I'm happy to see that transport companies are also willing to invest in this type of infrastructure. But we'll still need more electricity production and better distribution. Our data show that electricity demand for electric vehicles will increase total electricity consumption in the EU by at least 2% by 2030. We also need to gradually build up demand for sustainable fuels, in particular for ships and planes. And for this, we have our Refuel EU Aviation in the package, which we hope will boost the use of renewable low-carbon fuels for planes, and the Fuel EU Maritime will do the same for ships. For aviation, we want fuel suppliers to distribute increasing quantities of sustainable alternative fuels to EU airports and to make sure that the airlines are using it. We ask them to blend traditional fuel with increasing amounts of sustainable alternative fuel, starting from 5% in 2030 and rising to 63% in 2050. This would reduce aviation emissions by around 2/3 by 2050. But again, to get there, we need, by some estimation of the industry, 7 additional renewable and low-carbon fuels production plants across the EU by 2030, corresponding to an increase in production capacity of 2.2 million tons of renewable and low-carbon fuels per year. The increase in production capacity needs to increase over time, and by 2050 we estimate that 104 production plants will be needed across Europe. So, alongside regulation, we need to invest in physical production, that we have enough green energy to meet demand. Importing is not straightforward, in particular for hydrogen. Plus, we don't want to create new dependencies. Instead, we need to ramp up production here in Europe and quickly. And this will require collaboration across the entire value chain, which we have initiated by creating a renewable and low-carbon fuels alliance to complement our hydrogen alliance. Let me end by reminding everyone that we will need significant investment to go from ambition to reality. Our assessment before the Green Deal showed investment needs for the vehicles and infrastructure needed for low-carbon mobility to be around 130 billion euros per year up until 2030. This is not a small amount, which is why we are providing an unprecedented level of funding for the European transport sector through Connecting Europe Facility, Cohesion Funds, InvestEU Fund, Horizon Europe, and the Innovation Fund. We have allocated nearly 100 billion euros for this financial time and to support the development of this transport system. And this was doubled when, with the adoption of the next generation EU budget, and in particular through the Recovery and Resilience Facility. Under this one, it is estimated that member states dedicated more than 90 billion euros for transport investments and reforms. So with the transport and energy sectors working together, a regulatory framework to support supply, it's on the way, and with good financing, I'm confident that we are on the right path to secure our energy supply and reaching our emission targets. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have time for questions. Please remind you to state your media organization and who you're directing the question for. Here in the middle, in the red.
Thank you very much. I'm Anna Hubert from Context. I have two questions regarding energy. The first one is that, maybe to you both, given the division between the 27 member states on electricity market reform, be it the content or the timing, do you still expect that it could have an impact on this winter, next winter? And my second question is, when should we expect the decision regarding the demand reduction target for gas? Thank you.
Maybe, Kadri, I will start with the first part. So the way I read my minister colleagues is basically we've had a lot of extra meetings within the Energy Council, and rightly so. During the Czech presidency last fall, we had the opportunity to meet each other quite a lot. All of those meetings were really needed, but the agenda was really tainted by very acute issues and measures of more of an emergency character. And what we're trying to facilitate with the Swedish presidency is obviously both handling emergency issues that might come up during the spring, but also finding some way of pushing for the long-term solutions to a lot of the issues that member states within the European Union are struggling with. That's why we have green transition and competitiveness as two of our four major priorities for the Swedish presidency. And the electricity market design is definitely an issue of more long-term perspective. However, I think tempo is of utmost importance, and the Swedish presidency is prepared to work as swiftly as possible during the spring, really taking things forward as far as it's possible. And I think that we should see even the long-term measures as sort of an emergency measure as well. And that's why we're really looking forward to what the Commission has to present on the 14th of March. And that's why it was also so important to have this discussion today with all of the ministers. But I would say, if I read my colleagues correctly, there is really an appetite for and a lot of member states asking for the European Union to sort of lift itself out of the only the emergency and need for decisions and reaching more of those long-term decisions. And the electricity market design is definitely one of them. Kadri?
Yes, I agree. We also see that electricity market design has to be an ordinary legislative piece of legislation. That means that both co-legislators will be involved. From our side, we will present targeted reform by mid-March, and I have started my outreach. I have explained the content to the ministers already in December, and also we expect that Parliament will treat this proposal as a priority so that we can proceed with necessary procedures as fast as possible. Now, coming to the demand reduction, we discussed today with ministers if there is a willingness to prolong this temporary measure, in essence, due to the fact that we used last year Article 122. And there was a broad understanding that LNG markets will remain very tense also for this year, 2023, due to the fact that Russian gas production is significantly lower than it was year before the war started, and due to the fact that China will return after COVID lockdown measures will expire. And saying that, we will now discuss when exactly we will present the prolongation proposal, and then Council will discuss this proposal in the next meeting. Yes, thank you.
And then we'll take it from there. Next question.
So I think we have one more question. We can take in the middle here to the left.
Thank you very much. John Ainger, Bloomberg. Obviously, a lot of the debate at the moment is about the EU's response to the IRA, and one of those components is the price that the EU pays for its energy. I think electricity prices in China are 3 times more than in the EU currently as well. Obviously, China is a focus of the response. Is there anything that the EU can do in this upcoming electricity market reform to lower prices in the short term, Commissioner Simpson? And then just secondly, on the transport front, Germany was quite vocal this morning about the Commission coming forward with a proposal for e-fuels in line with the CO2 emissions reductions in cars, the phase out of the combustion engine by 2035. Is this something the Commission will come up with before the end of its mandate next year? Thank you.
The aim of electricity market design is exactly to give our consumers and industry a possibility to benefit from low-cost renewables. And at the same time, we have to also give clear signals for future investments. Unless there is willingness to invest into our renewable sector, we will not be able to replace fossil fuels with sustainable alternatives. And this is the only way how we will control our electricity prices, while continuous dependence on imported fossil fuels doesn't allow us to compete with these regions who are themselves producers of fossil fuels. And how will we do that? We will allow industry to take advantage of power purchase agreements that allows them to buy electricity with predictable prices, and where necessary, where state aid is necessary, we will also promote contracts for difference. And we also aim to give the opportunity for small and medium enterprises and even households to benefit from renewables, larger share of renewables, and allow them to opt for low-risk contract schemes. Thank you.
And for the transport question, if I may, Germany is worrying, as many people in the transport community, that very aggressive electrification of the transport and vehicles would be premature, or we won't have enough electricity to be delivered. We'll have stranded assets. So everyone is worrying. It's a revolution, and we know from experience that not all the revolutions are well ending. So this is my interpretation on where Germany stands, and I think they would like to see an alternative, or at least a part of the vehicles still to be able to run on combustion engines. So that's why they insist for the e-fuels. It's not my file directly, but I think the discussion is not closed, even though the vote was taken.
Okay, so we have one last question here in front. Susanne?
Susanne from Swedish Radio. You mentioned how to promote the rolling out for renewables, but will nuclear also be included in these measures that you mentioned?
We are right now analyzing the responses from public consultation, and indeed contracts for difference will cover low carbon or renewable installations, and will allow then also to promote future investments in these production units that we will need to decarbonize our economy. The discussions are still ongoing. One of the possibilities is to cover not only renewables but also all the low carbon sources.
Thank you very much. That's all the time we have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.